What if the very language you speak is secretly programming you to be terrified?
Wow. Okay, just jumping right in.
I mean, think about that for a second. We tend to view language as just a tool, right? A totally neutral delivery system. We use it to describe our feelings or, our stress and anxieties to other
Well,
people.
it's just the vehicle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if the words themselves aren't just descriptions? What if they are the actual, literal architectural blueprints that construct this psychological traps we find ourselves stuck in, at 3 in the morning when we just can't sleep?
It is a deeply unsettling proposition
It really is.
because it suggests that our baseline anxieties might not just be a product of our modern environment. Like, it's not just your job or social media. It might be an inherited condition that is literally wired into the vocabulary passed down by our ancestors.
And that concept is the entire foundation of our deep dive today. We are exploring this really remarkable essay written by a philosopher named Xue Feng. It's dated September 12th, 2025.
Yeah, and he takes this universal grinding human experience of fear and he does something totally different with it.
Right. Instead of analyzing it through clinical psychology or neurobiology, he deconstructs it through the literal visual building blocks of Chinese characters.
Which provides just a completely paradigm-shifting lens. I mean, the core premise of Shufang's essay rests on the idea that Chinese characters are not arbitrary scribbles.
They aren't just shapes people agreed on for the sake of, like, keeping records or trading grain.
Exactly. He argues that they are divinely inspired symbols and that their physical forms, literally the way the ink sits within the square on the page, embody these timeless, uncompromising philosophical truths about the human soul.
So our goal for you today is to walk away with an entirely new framework, a new way of visualizing the relationship between what you value in life, how you construct your days, and what you are ultimately afraid of.
Because if this essay is right, language shifts from being a descriptive tool to a diagnostic one.
Yes, it reveals our hidden sicknesses.
But to truly appreciate the weight of his conclusion on fear, we first have to, we kind of have to train our minds to look at language spatially.
We have to learn how to read the philosophy embedded in the ink.
Right. So, Sifeng begins the essay by dissecting a few everyday concepts. He shows how these visual morality tales function before we tackle the heavy machinery of human anxiety.
Let's start with a foundational social institution, marriage.
Okay, yeah.
If you look at the Chinese character for marriage, which is pronounced hun, you don't just see a word, you see an argument.
You really do. Imagine a square canvas. On the left side of this canvas, you have the specific character component that means woman.
Okay.
Then, taking up the right side of the canvas, you have the character component hun, which translates to twilight or dim, or to become confused.
So structurally, the concept of marriage is literally depicted as a woman standing next to a space of confusion or dimness.
That's the literal architecture of the word.
My immediate reaction to that, reading it through a modern lens, is that it's perhaps an archaic patriarchal warning. Like, oh, marriage confuses women.
Sure, that's the modern instinct. But Shufeng is pointing toward a much broader psychological mechanism here.
Right.
Beyond any social politics, the visual architecture suggests a mechanism of blurring. When you enter into this union, the sharp, distinct edges of individual clarity become dim.
Ah, I see.
The philosophy embedded in the ink argues that marriage inherently involves a disorientation of the self. Two identities merge and the individual vision becomes clouded or fundamentally altered by the partnership.
Wow. It forces you to look at a totally mundane word and reckon with a profound existential cost.
It does. And he contrasts that disorienting image with the character for good, pronounced how.
Which is another amazing example.
Yeah, so in this character, the radical for woman still sits on the left, but now it's placed immediately beside the symbol for child or son on the right.
Which completely upends how I usually think about the concept of goodness.
How?
Well, I mean, in Western philosophy, we often treat goodness as this abstract divine light, or like this intangible moral high ground. But this character grounds goodness in something incredibly physical and messy.
It's purely relational.
Exactly. It defines goodness as the harmony of family. The visual representation argues that morality isn't an intellectual achievement. It is the lived, tangible connection between a parent and a child.
That proximity, that specific bond, is the foundational building block of a good reality.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because while goodness seems kind of intuitive, His breakdown of the character for praise feels entirely disruptive to our modern
Oh
sensibilities.
yeah, the character Kua.
Right.
Yeah.
Structurally, Swiffing interprets the components of this character to mean great loss.
Great loss.
And I am struggling to reconcile that with how our society operates today. I mean, we view praise as the ultimate gain, right?
Definitely.
You get a promotion, you gain followers online, you win an award. Those are accumulations of status. Why would the linguistic blueprint for praise equate it to a massive deficit?
Because it forces us to examine the hidden transaction behind external validation.
The hidden transaction. Okay, explain that.
Well, if praise inherently requires great loss, the mechanism is one of sacrifice. To earn the universal applause of the world, you cannot simply be your authentic, unvarnished self.
Oh, wow.
Right, you have to carve away parts of your own desires, your personal comfort, your dissenting opinions. You lose them to fit into the specific mold that society rewards.
You essentially purchase the applause of others by spending your own authenticity.
Yeah.
You lose yourself to gain the crowd.
Exactly the mechanism the character describes. And that theme of internal sacrifice leads directly into what might be the most devastating everyday example in the essay.
The character for busy, pronounced Mang.
Yes, this one is brutal.
Let me set the visual for this one for the listeners. You have two components. On one side, you have the symbol for heart. On the other side, you have the symbol for death.
Heart and death.
So the literal architecture of the word busy is a dead heart.
It is just a profound indictment of how we live today. It explains the causal relationship between internal emptiness and external franticness.
Because we treat busyness like a shield.
We really do.
If your calendar is full, if you're rushing from meeting to meeting, you are important.
Yeah.
You matter. But this ancient linguistic structure is quietly diagnosing that behavior as a symptom of spiritual necrosis.
Because when the internal center dies, when your passion, your spiritual grounding, or your true purpose fades away, you're left with a terrifying void.
And how do you avoid looking at that void?
You fill the physical space with relentless activity. The dead heart relies on the noise of being busy to mask its own silence.
So if a common word like busy secretly functions as a warning light for a dead soul, we have to ask what kind of psychological terror is structurally woven into the concept of fear itself.
And that brings us to the absolute core of the essay. Shuifeng dissects the two-character Chinese word for fear, Kongju. Right. And he splits the word in half to reveal that human anxiety operates on two entirely different frequencies depending on where you sit in the social hierarchy.
Let's start with the first frequency, the left half of the word, the character Kong. This is where the text links baseline, grinding anxiety directly to the physical vulnerability of the working class.
Picture the structural layout of this character. At the top, you have two components sitting side by side. Gong, which means work, and fan, which means ordinary.
Work and ordinary.
Right. And sitting directly underneath them, bearing their combined weight, is sin, the component for heart.
So you literally have the concept of an ordinary worker pressing down on the human heart.
Yes. According to Shuifeng, this perfectly encapsulates the baseline state of the masses. The ordinary working heart is intrinsically defined by this specific flavor of fear.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this logic completely contradicts the modern gospel of hustle culture.
Oh, absolutely.
Today, we're told that hard work is the antidote to anxiety. If you're worried about the economy or your future, the solution is to put your head down, grind harder, and work your way out of the danger zone.
Right, outwork your fear.
Exactly. But the text argues that being an ordinary worker isn't the cure for fear, it is the very engine generating it.
What's fascinating here is the precise nature of the threat. The ordinary heart isn't suffering from existential dread about the meaning of the universe. It's terrified by the arithmetic of survival.
Right. The essay is brutally specific about what this heart anticipates. They fear not having enough food. They fear being unable to afford a marriage.
Yeah.
They face the crushing anxiety of raising children, paying for their education, dreading the medical bills when illness inevitably strikes, and looking down the barrel of old age, wondering how they will survive when their bodies can no longer perform the work required by the character.
It describes the psychology of a fragile equilibrium. When you exist as an ordinary worker, your life is a carefully balanced house of cards.
It really is.
A single unexpected disaster like a broken bone, a corporate layoff, a natural disaster can obliterate your ability to survive. The fear is a rational response to a structural vulnerability.
Because you have zero margin for error. The fear isn't a personality flaw, it's the atmospheric pressure of living at the bottom of the system.
Exactly.
The language itself dictates that as long as your heart is anchored to ordinary work, it will be crushed by the anticipation of not having enough.
It is the fear of lack, the dread that tomorrow the resources required to sustain your biology will simply run out.
So, looking at this structurally, the human instinct is to escape. If the bottom of the pyramid is defined by the terror of vulnerability, the logical solution is to climb.
Climb the ladder.
Right. You acquire wealth, you gain power, you shed the label of ordinary, you try to buy your way out of the Kong anxiety.
Which brings us to the second half of the word for fear, Ju. And this is where Suofeng reveals the ultimate trap of human ambition.
A trap.
Yes. Escaping the vulnerability of the ordinary worker does not grant you peace. It simply introduces you to a new mechanism of terror.
Let's look at the blueprint for the character Ju.
Once again, we find Sin, the heart. But this time, it is paired with the component Ju, which translates to possessions, tools, or equipment.
The heart, sitting right next to its possessions.
And Shusang translates this architecture directly. When the heart possesses wealth, fear arises.
I want to push past the surface level cliche of more money, more problems here, because what the text is describing feels much closer to, like, the physics of potential energy.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Think about it. When you're an ordinary worker on the ground, you fear starving. So you climb the ladder to get away from the ground. But the higher you climb and the more security you accumulate, you're just building up the potential kinetic energy of a devastating fall.
Right.
You haven't escaped the danger. You've just increased the height you can plummet from.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Shufeng has mapped the entire spectrum of human anxiety across these two characters. The ordinary worker fears lack. The privileged elite fears loss.
And Shufeng defines this wealth quite broadly, doesn't he? It's not just
Yeah.
a fat bank account that triggers this mechanism.
No, not at all. He categorizes it into tangible and intangible possessions. Tangible wealth is the physical anchor. Money, sprawling houses, vehicles, vast farmlands.
He even includes family in that, right?
Yes, the text starkly categorizes children as a form of tangible possession that ties your heart to the fear of loss in the physical world.
And then there's the intangible wealth, which is the social armor we build. Status, official rank, a pristine reputation, institutional authority.
Exactly. And the mechanism of fear here is maintenance.
Maintenance.
When your heart becomes attached to these possessions, your entire psychological energy is consumed by the terrifying task of guarding them. You live in a state of hypervigilance.
Anticipating the market crash that takes your money. The scandal that ruins your reputation. Or the political shift that strips your authority.
It's an airtight prison. The philosophy of the language is telling us that society's grandest narrative, like, the hero's journey of climbing out of poverty to achieve wealth and status, is secretly a trick.
A total trick. You spend decades outrunning the fear of starvation, only to reach the penthouse and find that your heart is now paralyzed by the fear of losing the penthouse.
The stakes just change shape. The text argues that the greater the wealth or fame, the deeper the fear, because there is simply more surface area for disaster to strike.
It really reframes the anxiety of high achievers. If you've ever accomplished a massive goal and felt a sudden wave of dread instead of celebration, well, the language is validating that experience.
It's telling you, of course you are terrified. Your heart just acquired a new possession. That is the literal structural definition of fear.
By breaking down Kongju, Kuifeng forces us to see that the powerless and the powerful are locked in the exact same psychological condition.
They are.
Which naturally leads to the most critical question of this entire deep dive. If the people at the bottom are terrified and the people at the top are terrified, is the human experience just a closed loop of anxiety? Is anyone actually free?
According to the essay, freedom exists. But achieving it requires a radical rejection of both paradigms we just discussed.
How radical.
Well, Zifeng states that the only beings who live without fear are those who have transcended the ordinary world.
What does that actualize as? How do you transcend the system?
He describes them with a beautiful paradox. The fearless are those who own nothing, yet possess everything.
Own nothing, yet possess everything. It deliberately breaks the connection between the heart and the concept of possessions.
Precisely. To give this concept shape, Suofeng points to specific spiritual archetypes: celestials, Buddhas, angels, and bodhisattvas. These entities are structurally immune to fear because they have removed themselves from the game entirely. They don't operate in the realm of ordinary work, so they cannot be threatened by starvation. And because they claim ownership over nothing, they offer no targets for loss.
They exist completely outside the jurisdiction of Kongju.
Exactly.
But let's bring this crashing back down to the reality of a modern listener.
Huh.
Because Huidafeng doesn't just talk about ethereal angels. He takes direct aim at a very specific group of modern professionals who believe they have successfully insulated themselves from fear.
Yes, he targets officials.
Mhm.
And the text is explicit that this doesn't just mean emperors or high-ranking politicians. It encompasses anyone who serves the bureaucratic system.
He uses the historical phrase, eating the emperor's grain,
Right.
which today translates perfectly to anyone relying on a government salary.
Yes.
Civil servants, local administrators, postal workers.
Huifeng states that by relying on the system, civil servants are intrinsically, philosophically bound to fear.
Now, I want to push back heavily on this on behalf of our audience.
Sure.
Go ahead. What does this all mean for someone driving to their civil service job right now? I mean, a pension, a union, a stable government paycheck.
Yeah.
These things provide actual relief from the physical fear of starvation.
They do provide stability.
So isn't Shi Feng being overly cynical by claiming that securing a safe public service job is a trap?
This raises an important question about the definition of true relief. We have to revisit the essay's opening definition of fear.
Remind me.
Fear is the anxiety and apprehension that arise when the mind anticipates events that have not yet occurred.
Right.
Anticipation.
Why does someone seek out the emperor's grain? They're trying to build a fortress against uncertainty. They're anticipating the dangers of the future and trying to pre-solve them with a pension.
So they're trying to cure the calm fear of lack by acquiring the jump security of institutional possessions.
Exactly. And the fortress works to keep starvation out. But Shuofeng's argument is that the fortress also locks you inside.
I see. By attaching your survival to the massive machinery of the state, you have merely swapped your anxieties. Now, you're anticipating institutional failure. Will inflation destroy the pension? Will the political administration change and eliminate my department? Will I anger a superior and lose my rank?
The mechanism of anticipation hasn't stopped at all.
Yeah.
It has just recalibrated to worry about different variables.
You are still trying to control the unoccurred future. By contrasting the civil servant with the liberated Buddha, Shuiveng defines true psychological freedom not as having enough resources to survive the future, but as severing the desire to possess the future at all.
Severing the desire to possess the future.
If you detach entirely, you remove the source of anticipation. And without anticipation, fear cannot structurally exist in the mind.
It is a devastatingly beautiful logic.
Yeah.
You cannot outwork fear, you cannot out-earn fear, and you cannot outplan fear with a secure government job.
No, you can't.
The only exit door is to dismantle the architectural milieu to possess tomorrow.
It demands a complete redesign of what we consider to be a safe, successful human life.
This entire essay has been a masterclass in reevaluating the invisible structures around us. We started this deep dive looking at a few strokes of ink, assuming they were just tools for communication.
And we discovered that everyday words like marriage, goodness, praise, and busyness carry profound diagnostic warnings about human behavior.
We dissected the absolute duality of our anxiety. We looked at Kong, the weight of the ordinary worker crushed by the arithmetic of survival and the terror of lack.
Right.
And we examined you, the trap of privilege, where the heart becomes anchored to its wealth and status, forever paralyzed by the fear of loss.
Leaving us with the ultimate challenge. To recognize that as long as we operate within the systems of ordinary vulnerability or institutional wealth, we are playing a rigged game.
It fundamentally changes how you listen to your own thoughts. And that brings me to a final concept I want to leave you with today, something to turn over in your mind as you go about your week, building on this idea of linguistic blueprints.
It is a thread absolutely worth pulling.
If Shuifeng's premise is correct, if the language passed down to us by our ancestors inherently wires our brains to equate an ordinary working heart with terror, or a heart with possessions, with the anxiety of loss, we are essentially living inside an inherited psychological prison.
The vocabulary guarantees the suffering.
Exactly. The vocabulary we use guarantees our suffering. So how might humanity consciously redesign language in the future to escape these traps? What does a fearless vocabulary actually look like?
That's the real question.
If you were tasked with drawing a brand new symbol for work that didn't structurally enforce the fear of poverty, or a new symbol for wealth that didn't trigger the terror of loss, how would you design it? What shapes would you use to build a healthy soul? Because until we literally rewrite the architecture of how we think, we might just be doomed to keep staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning, terrified of a future that hasn't even arrived.